Welcome, everybody, to our first episode of the podcast for aviation investors. So I have with me an extraordinarily talented and accomplished speaker. His name is Todd Weeber. And I'm going to ask, rather than me trying to describe what he's done, because he's a man of immense knowledge and experience, I'd like to ask the first question to you, Todd. So for those that don't know you yet, I know a lot of people do, you're a very well networked guy. So how did your journey in aviation and investment begin?
Well, thank you for having me, David. Very glad to be here. And I never expected to be as involved in investing in aviation as I am. Presently, I have a network of partners who are fully invested in elements of business aviation, security, and healthcare, all revolved around solving workforce problems in the aviation and aerospace sectors. I got involved because approaching retirement, I kept getting asked to be involved in projects that integrated key elements of business aviation operations and taking things that were minimally profitable and creating acceptable, if not robust, profits from them. And I realized that after I'd been doing what I'd been doing my whole career, it was easy to see how traditional venture capital and angel investors were pulling apart things that when they're put together properly are profitable. So first things first, start advising friends and colleagues to stop doing that and instead focus on the portions of a very fragmented market that are consistently profitable. So I was attracted to business aviation as an investment, as a strategic advisor and investor, because of the common belief that it's a great place to go to lose capital, to start with $1 billion and wind up with several million. And while that is truly a possibility, the same thing holds true for people that want to deploy a network of food trucks or lemonade stands. So yes, mismanaged capital results in pretty significant losses, but business aviation, and this is pretty common no matter where business aircraft fly in the world, business aviation is very resilient to unforeseen negative economic conditions. It's the type of business where if you pick the right segment, it is the first consumer product to rebound if there are any issues. And we've done retroactive analysis all the way back to 9/11, the 2008 crisis, the COVID crisis, each recession in between. And you find that there's a segment of demand in business aviation that not only bounces back very quickly if there's any structural problem getting in the way of operations, such as an emergency airspace shutdown. If it is possible for certain aircraft to fly, they will fly. But not just that, that same segment of business aviation tends to fly more directly proportional to the economic crisis that's happening. So truly wealthy people that can afford the business aviation as a tool will leverage that tool to take advantage of variability in the economic environment. It's really counterintuitive. I mean, we as consumers see the news and we see that demand is pulling back in airlines, and we see articles about certain business aviation operators struggling, but the struggle comes from the pullback from people who are economically vulnerable.
Exactly. So where did you get all this knowledge from? Because you're going from one side, like operations, if I understand, and then the other side to finance. And yeah, you say you're getting close to retirement, but that's a wealth of knowledge and you seem to have got it in spades. So how was your story been built up along those things? How did you become the operator of knowledge and get your finance understandings and where those, interesting niches could be? I want to know what your story is. How did that go?
Thank you. I'd like to say that I had a meticulous plan. When I was a much, much younger and more naive man, I thought I could see my life planned out in front of me. But this kind of practice does not come as an overnight success. It comes from being the type of person who is interested in operating in a crisis environment and solving a crisis. As a person that likes to be part of a group that solves a crisis. Experience comes from being in the middle of every economic crisis that impacts commercial or business aviation. So I was just lucky enough to arrive on the professional scene as a professional aviator in the early 90s and participate in the success and failure of several airlines. So as an up and coming commercial pilot in a seniority based system, I got to enjoy well managed organizations and poorly managed organizations. And for each economic crisis, I happened to be in the right place and the right time at each organization to take advantage. So I was at Berkshire Hathaway's NetJets during 2008 when the entire business model was brought into question. And we had a period of time for about 90 days that the executive leadership team referred to as sleeping in suits, because we would arrive to work long before sunrise and we would work until we reached the point of diminishing returns and then go home. And with each of those opportunities, whether it's a post 9/11 environment, a post 2008 environment, or a post COVID environment, if you are on the crisis management team, managing the crisis, so you might even say crisis management team, the first thing you do with the organization afterwards is you configure it for success in case that crisis happens again. So not only do you very quickly learn what works and what does not work in each component of the business, but you get a strong sense of how to build it to sustain the next collision with the unexpected.
Does that come because I understand that you're a captain of you're a commercial pilot. You was a captain for doing those. Did that, let's say, the mentality or the ideology of like you have to do that crisis management come from that training, or was there some other training involved that actually got you to that way of thinking and that way of like your modus operandi?
That's a really interesting question. All my kids are grown and off in the workforce now, so there's no one around me required to refer to me as captain anymore. But I hadn't thought about the leadership acumen. I'd say there's three elements to being able to capitalize on a crisis. The first element was actually I was a mediocre to less than successful wrestling athlete all through high school. A little bit better at cross country because I could run and still can run. And when you're a mediocre to low performing wrestling athlete, there's one thing you learn more than anything else. It's how to take a punch in the face and keep on going. You wind up getting beaten up as part of your practice, and getting back up on your feet and continuing by yourself without support from any other team members is a very strong foundation for business and life. I have 3 adult children, and there is a lot of direct transfer from the multiple crises that happen to kids as they grow up in the 90s and 2000s. That transfers directly over to leadership. And then finally, yes, it is true that being an aircraft captain or in any kind of leadership where you are trained to be prepared for a crisis and even improvise if necessary. So the Miracle on the Hudson with Captain Sullenberger is a perfect example of someone who had an entire career of every 6 months in the simulator being put through drills, once a year being put through an operational line check, 2 times a year having written tests just to train. And then there he was with a plane full of people, and 90 seconds after taking birds in the engine, he was landing safely on the Hudson River. 90 seconds. It's not all a panacea. With these leadership skills, we have to surround ourselves with people who will slow us down and ask us to reconsider some decisions. Because if you are very confident in making decisions in a crisis, you will make decisions quickly and put them behind you. So it's very important to wrap the whole package together in 2 types of ribbons that hold it all together. One is fact-based decision-making, just facts, not emotion, not data. Data is very noisy, but information. So informed fact-based decision-making, and having the humility to understand that everybody needs mentors. So be the first person in the room to mentally raise your hand and say, I don't understand, and I need to find someone who can explain this to me like I'm 10 years old.
wisdom just oozing out from you there. I appreciate that a lot for you telling that. So I also realized that you have a motto, and it's when I read it, I was thinking, okay, there's a bit of thought behind that. And I understand your motto to be, don't chase the wave, build the runway. So what does that mean in today's aviation investment climate?
It means don't put me in charge of any marketing team anywhere ever. That's what that means. I had a business card when I first became an independent flight instructor, and on the back of it, it said, aviation safety is an attitude, a discipline, and a lifestyle. And I just thought that it was what it was. And for 20 years, people were finding my business card and calling me up and saying, hey, I've got that stuck to my wall. And that's turned into a culture rallying cry for people that use safety management systems as part of their business operating system and find commercial success. So don't chase the wave, build the runway is just something that I started saying to people. We're not here to be opportunists. We're not here to go and see what everybody else is flocking to and flock to it instead. Stick to the infrastructure. Are we amongst the crowd trying to become award-winning surfers by catching a killer tube in Hawaii and hoping that it's caught on video and goes viral? Certainly not. We would rather be involved in refining and making the world's finest surfboard and all the infrastructure that's required to have something that everybody needs, and they think of first. So how does that apply to finance and investment? I'll give you one practical example. Over the last 15 years, private equity has been jumping in and attempting to roll up aircraft operators. Private equity has been jumping into airport property and taking a location like a fixed base operation or an FBO and taking the most profitable elements of their profit stack out and investing in an independent business. So in two ways, capital has piled on this idea that more airplanes are better and piled onto this idea that if we just extract the profitable parts of an FBO and make it a standalone business, that's a smart play. That is not a smart play at all. The build the runway is a matter of properly integrating products and cultures that sell and maintain those products. Should sound familiar to people, right?
It does, yeah.
That's for the operator side, and reassembling the profit stack at airports. Because if you take an airport facility and you start subtracting from it, and one organization says, I'm going to buy this most profitable part, I'm going to buy this most profitable part, what's left is a shell without sufficient business volume to make that incremental revenue on difficult things. Building the runway in terms of infrastructure would be building and keeping infrastructure together, because we've talked about integration before on this episode. If you properly integrate elements that feed off each other, you find just common sense efficiencies, reduction in costs of goods sold. A good business aviation facility where all the components are integrated is incredibly profitable. Where to find something like that today? It's amazing. Even some of the big names have given away some of the key things that contribute to their profitability.
Okay, because that answers the question, like you mentioned at the beginning, that historically aviation by a lot of people has been unprofitable. And your approach now, you've highlighted why it's been unprofitable for so many. But what's changed? Obviously, this is nothing new. By taking something away from a business, say an airport, it's going to be less than what it was as a combination. So what's changed to make people think this different way, or to evolve it? Why now and not like 50 years ago? Or why did it change?
Culture and leadership transformation is what has changed, period. Aviation as a industrial matter has its roots in warfare and military. And the entire operation, from the tip of the airplane to the back end of the hangar for decades and decades, operations has thought of itself as a success if they can complete a mission safely and within the budget allocated to that operation. So in the simplest terms, to be operating businesses with the philosophy that we have an operating budget, and it's our mission to spend every dollar and respond to requests to move people within those parameters. That leads to decision making that has nothing to do with being a sustainable business or being profitable, which makes commercial and private and business aviation organizations very vulnerable to markets changes. So the cost of labor is one of the biggest costs for everybody, has always been. The cost of fuel, the cost of raw materials and parts to maintain your equipment. And now in 2025, that's a serious problem, not just on the technical side for aviation, but just trying to get someone to come to your facility and repair the plumbing or do some repair work to your building. You probably have to pay a premium and get on a waiting list. So costs are increasing, and there is a positive side effect to venture capital and angel investors coming into aviation. Same thing with people that run major airlines. If you look at people that run major airlines, some of the most successful airlines, the people in charge have a very strong finance and or commercial background. And so they're able to reconfigure the organizations in a way that their first mission is to make sure that they can safely operate in a manner that is compliant. The next mission is to make sure that the organization is economically resilient and can tolerate fluctuations in the cost of labor, cost of energy, and cost of materials. And then the third responsibility that they have is to innovate and keep up with the demands of their customer in a way that is profitable. So the shift just in the last 2 decades for commercial aviation, and perhaps the last really 5, maybe 8 years for business aviation, the focus is on those elements of business resilience and profitability. It is possible with the proper focus.
So leading into that then, so what are the biggest myths then that institutional investors, we're talking about them now, still believe about the aviation sector? Because as you iterate now or allude to, it has changed. So what's the biggest myths then from institutional investors? Why are they getting it so wrong?
They're correct in the methodological assumption that aviation as a whole, business aviation specifically, is a risky place to invest. It's more than just an alternate investment. And the myth would be true if you just took pieces of the demand marketplace. So if we think of business aviation demand volume distributed within a triangle, where the tip of the triangle are the super wealthy people that have no problem buying a $120 million jet and not flying it very much and paying for an entire flight department, does that not seem inefficient and highly costly? That's at the tippy top of the pyramid. And at the bottom of the demand pyramid, there's a lot of volume generated by people who cannot actually afford business aviation. There's been a lot of talk over the past 10 years about democratizing aviation. Decades ago, when the fractional aviation model was invented by Richard Santulli, then executive jet, that was democratizing aviation. It's already been done. And so NetJets has done it, FlexJet has done it, VistaJet has done it, all the way down to 25-hour jet cards. A jet card customer or someone who flies fewer than 200 hours a year, they are economically vulnerable to things that happen in the economy. So the base of the pyramid gets wiped out quickly within 6 months of consumer confidence being eroded. It's that base of the pyramid where businesses use business aviation, where wealthy people are ultra wealthy, but they're not high enough up in the billionaires club. So they and their people are taking advantage of the tool to grow their portfolio and grow their personal wealth. And the more volatility in the economy, the more they move around to take advantage of chess pieces moving on the board. So the myth is true if you look at the triangle and take out the entire middle third. The bottom will pull back and you see all kinds of news, less people taking selfies on jets. Truly wealthy people or business people, they don't take pictures of anyone or anything while they're out there taking advantage of the tool. Their mission is to be on it comfortably, safely for the least amount of time humanly possible. It is not an experience that is the center of their day. It's a part of their day. And so you get a lot of news from the selfie takers and social media users no longer appearing. I guess I have to fly the airlines, they'll say. And then at the top, there's a constant news feed of let's look inside this celebrity's jet. Let's follow this celebrity's jet. What a waste. How opulent. And it ignores the fact that in the base of the pyramid, there is flying that not only is immune to economic uncertainty, but the more uncertainty that exists, the greater demand pull on that middle part of the market. So you have to give them credit. All myths come with someone's observation of something that they thought was true. But if the entire business aviation marketplace was only super wealthy people who own their own flight departments and people that really cannot consistently afford business aviation because they're buying it 25 hours at a time and they're somewhere between that 25 hours a year and 200 hours a year, it's excellent that business aviation is part of their portfolio. But anything with this level of cost, you can't blame people for pulling back and concentrating on other luxury activities. So they might give up their 25 hours a year and instead hang on to a vacation property.
So what you're saying then is that aviation isn't a growth play, it's more like a yield engine. So can you unpack that idea for us? Like, how do you get the yield then from aircraft? Because obviously by growing and stuff like that, but how does the yield come then from doing those operations?
There are still growth opportunities and there are roll-up opportunities, so to speak. That's a real blunt term to say that we're going to go and roll something up. It's way more complicated than just buying businesses and asking someone to stitch them together. But those are those future wins in the growth side have to do with maintenance and ground operations and what used to be known as a fixed base operation. And I just say that because the definition of an FBO now is really different from what it was even 10 years ago. But a successful airport operation with a team that knows how to extract profitability out of it, let's say the reintegration of the business aviation airport environment, that is a growth play. It includes many profitable elements that have true business synergy. As far as extracting yield from aviation, this is where there's a counterintuitive way to fail. And that is the marketplace and analysts and venture capitalists come to business aviation and they're usually armed with the most excellent airline analysts that they can find. The best in aviation, someone that they grabbed from a revenue management department or an analytics department. And to view business aviation through that lens is a mistake because of the wide variations in the types of airplanes that are operating, the cost structure behind each airplane, and the operating environment of each airplane. For example, a large airline that is successful at extracting profit and eliminating cost will perform an exercise known as fleet rationalization, and they'll try and keep the fleet as common as possible, either one or two manufacturers, that's it. And then within that threshold, the fewest models of airplanes necessary to get the job done. That creates efficiencies just in every single category. When you come over to business aviation, if you could measure wide variations in aircraft types and missions, you could look at the type of special licenses that pilots have to operate those aircraft specific to the type of aircraft, therefore known as a type rating or a type certificate. And in North America right now, there's no fewer than 135 different types of business aircraft that require specific training for the pilots. That's a lot. And they vary widely in age, quality, cost to maintain, costs to operate. And so your three main pillars to assess cost of one of those 135 aircraft is the availability of the pilot supply, availability of the trained mechanic supply, the human resources element that can be very expensive the smaller the operating size of the fleet in the industry. Second pillar is costs to maintain. Brand new aircraft, the cost to maintain can be baked into programs and also the initial purchase price. But once you get downwind of that, the smaller the fleet, the more expensive it is. The older the fleet, the more expensive it is. And then thirdly, where the aircraft is being operated has a big deal to do with whether or not it's going to be profitable. Some parts of the country, like the east and west coast of the United States, or either of those destinations, let's say elements of Texas, there is so much demand for business aviation services that many operators have guaranteed revenue programs where they put their airplanes on the market and they're already pre-sold somewhere between 65 and 85 hours a month, which is a really great sweet spot. So if you examine those three things, of those 130 plus different types of aircraft, in our business models, there's no more than 7 that could possibly meet our criteria for profitable from the moment they're operated until the moment that they're disassembled.
Okay.
They are churning through the Goldilocks period in time. So right now we can identify a handful of aircraft where virtually any vintage, there's an ample supply of pilots, ample supply of mechanics, excellent operating cost criteria, and excellent service area that they're serving. So that to me is very interesting that, again, there's this fleet pyramid where there are many available at the base of the pyramid. There's fewer brand new airplanes at the top of the pyramid. And once again, in the middle, there's just a sliver of aircraft types that are in their Goldilocks period and can be operated profitably. They can be acquired profitably at a great purchase price. They can be operated profitably, and they can be disassembled profitably. So when we apply those criteria, we know we have a winner.
So it's definitely the role of pattern recognition and knowing where they are, etc. I can see that. So you've also led flight operation integrations and structured JVs yourself in the Gulf, as I understand. So what's the secret then to aligning capital and operations in aviation? I think you was alluding to it a little bit there.
To properly align capital and operations in aviation, you have to be skilled at communications. It's an information sharing exercise. A common misnomer in business, but especially in aviation and acutely in business aviation, is a lot of the talking heads are running around saying, I'm data driven. We're a data driven company. We have this data, we have that data, we have data. And sometimes I have to focus to keep from rolling my eyes because data in and of itself is just a meaningless pool of milestones and things to consider. If the data is pieced together properly, now you can make informed decisions. So in the investment world, we like to talk about disclosures. Is the person investing completely aware of all of the possibilities? Has everything been disclosed with complete transparency? So they're making an informed decision before they place their money. And what the experience that we have had is if you invest the time and the effort into culling the data and converting it to useful information, you wind up with models that at first blush compared to the rest of the sector seem too good to be true. So we've added on a couple of things. In addition to providing information to investors with capital, we also provide comparables, examples of how the comparables have succeeded or failed. And we also provide a retroactive analysis of how the current model might have performed in the most difficult of conditions. For example, we have demonstrated with the aircraft that we have selected that they would have been extremely successful throughout the entire economic crisis around 2008, where proven to be the first fleets back in the air to the extent possible after COVID, and so on and so forth. So we put together a proper information stack with a focus on disclosures. We provide comparables with examples of successes and failures and why this one is going to be in the success category. And then finally, we provide that retrograde analysis, retroactive analysis, because you will often get the question, what if I invest in this part of your sector and something similar to insert last economic disaster here happens? Great, take our analysis and digest it and let us know what you think.
So it makes a lot of sense. They're sort of going like using history as trying to be the teacher for the future sort of thing going forward. So the next thing then is I'd like to ask you is, what's your philosophy then? Like I'm asking for philosophy now. I know it's a big question, but don't get too nervous about that. So when it comes to a philosophy, so when it comes to building versus buying in aviation, because now we're just going to there, the investors come in, but maybe they'll get the idea saying I can do it myself. So what is your philosophy when it comes into either building it themselves or buying in aviation? What would be your philosophy around that?
I really enjoy the build versus buy debate. I don't know if I have a philosophy as much as I have observation. So let's see if we can discover the philosophy together. The key observation one, buy it. This is why I find the phrase roll-ups somewhat distasteful, because it really sets the stage for an oversimplification of what it would be like to buy businesses that appeared to be similar and then put them together. There are countless examples of well-funded teams that have come into business aviation and tried to force together businesses that were not compatible. I'll spare you the examples because it might chase you away from business aviation. I also could provide many examples, not quite as countless, of well-funded efforts in business aviation where the philosophy of the founders was, we're going to build it up right ourselves based on our experience. And there's been two categories of failure there. It's been trying to impose either an all military culture or an all airline culture on a business aviation organization, and then finding out that it's not at all similar culturally, or taking expertise from a different industry like energy or technology or finance and thinking that the humans will behave exactly the same in a business aviation environment. Not true. So I suppose if there's a philosophy, it's don't regard build it or buy it as an either or. It's more of a both and situation. So successful models in business aviation, which transcends over to regional airlines, which transcends over to major airlines and consolidation over there, is to do your best to buy the best organization, best company that you're looking at in your field. So what's the one thing you want to do? And this philosophy may work outside of business aviation. Find the best with the best leadership, the best culture, the best long-term prospects. Acquire that as a platform for growth. Do not add fixer-uppers. So get something worth building and invest in building in something that already has a proven track record.
That's so wise words. They're so wise words. So I understand that you're also writing a book. Are these words in the book as well? So it's called The Yield Engine. And so I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about that. So what inspired your book? Because you've got a wealth, obviously, to explain to everybody and for students like myself learning your lessons and stuff like that to happen. And what's the core message that you want readers to walk away with once reading the book?
Where did any book come from? My book writing habits are frankly terrible. They're the same as my book reading habits. If you were able to roam around my residence, you might think from a book standpoint that someone is in crisis, because in every given location, there's a book in progress. And my writing follows the same pattern, but it's not writing that I intended to do to publish. It was simply notes, started as notes to organize my own thoughts about projects that I'm working on. And those wind up becoming practical guides. So how do you get high conviction returns in uncorrelated industries? That's an integration project. That's a communication project. that means you can get yield or create a yield engine or a yield spread, whatever feels comfortable for you to say, by structuring certainty in environments that other people think are too noisy or too fragmented. So this volume is the first guide that's percolating to the top, because we as a group and I as a professional have found it difficult to attract and sustain the attention of people that need to know that a noisy and fragmented market is fraught with both peril, but also little corners of exceptional profitability. And I use in this particular guide the next generation aircraft as a topic. In the world, if we talk about vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, if we talk about electric aircraft, if we talk about the new hybrid regional aircraft, this is an unbelievable number. There's no fewer than 400 engineering companies working on next generation power plants, next generation platforms, actual models. We only see a handful of them in the news. And these are excellent firms with excellent designs and excellent engineering. But imagine an industry trying to break through to the next level of innovation and being divided into hundreds of silos. Hundreds. So someone has got to be dedicated enough to look at the entire value chain. And I throw down that term strictly from the perspective of the end user. What is my experience going to be like? I want to take a revised mode of transportation from here to here. Is it clean, safe, on time, affordable? If affordability is not an issue, is it exactly what I want? And you would be shocked by how much capital is being poured into one silo with how are we going to handle customer acquisition? Oh, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Our product will be so delightful, they'll just see it in the air and want to be a part of it.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. We've been on a couple of calls where, myself, when I'm doing my smaller deals, as to what you've been used to in the past doing, and listen to people. And it's all about, there's so many companies out there doing some similar ideas, that how can they all succeed? So that leads on to basically, I think it's going to be one of the last questions that I ask you, because obviously time's getting on. So what kind of aviation businesses are actually built to last, and how do you spot them?
Aviation businesses that are built to last have highly experienced people as owners or managers. I have never encountered a successful aviation business that did not survive an economic crisis, whether self-induced through bad decisions, an operational event, or an economic event. So as much as I am a huge fan of training and certifications and advanced degrees and modeling and working in the lab, when we're talking about something as intense as business aviation, there's no substitute for experience. So checkbox number one is the right people and the right culture and the right systematic approach to success needs to be in place. You can have those three great things, but if your business is in the wrong location, so let's say the business owner loves a remote location like Truckee, California, or even Bozeman, Montana, you might think you can make some kind of a killing by being at an epicenter of where wealthy people go. Not necessarily. You have to have that leadership and experience and systematic stack, and then place it in the right geographic environment for successful operations. And that is a combination of factor three. Who are your customers? In the aviation pyramid, where do they come from? They come from the very top. The 1% of the 1%. Do you want to be a part of the pack that's chasing celebrities and the uber wealthy? Is your customer base at the bottom of that pyramid stack of demand for business aviation? Those folks at the bottom who enjoy the glamour more than they do the efficiency of the tool and are the first to flee when there's economic uncertainty? Or do your customers come from the middle of that pyramid where economic volatility causes their activity to go up? If you can match those three things, you've got a customer with a demand base that is crisis resilient, if you've got the right location so that the economic nature of the location or regulatory environment of the location doesn't become a crisis, and are the right people with the right experience and the right systems operating it. So it's interesting. When you first get into private equity and investing, everyone's running around going, I need 5 years of financials. I need to understand what the projections are, and I need to understand your cash flow. I'll be the first to tell you that all of that information is meaningless data if you don't have a full understanding of who's operating it, where it's being operated, and who the customers are. So I have very counterintuitive questions when I first enter a potential deal. And they go like this: tell me everything you know about your customers. Tell me everything you know about your competition. That's an indirect way of assessing the environment, but very accurate. And then finally, I will ask the people that are leading the company, tell me about the last few times you thought about quitting. Quitting what? Quitting the job, selling the business, because you are not talking to an experienced person if they say everything is great. You're probably talking to a well-capitalized person who has their first 3 years of runway and they think that the party is never going to end. But if you're talking to someone who has been through a crisis, they'll snap right to their own experience of sleeping in suits and the extraordinary effort it took to learn and then change their behavior as a result of that experience and help bolster their business.
Yeah. It's like life teaches you a lesson in that sense. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah, the longer we all live, the more we realize the lessons do not decrease in frequency and magnitude.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously we're coming to the end of the podcast now and the webinar, of knowledge transfer, etc. So how can people reach out to you? How can they find more about you and connect with you? Or what is it that you would like people to connect with you with?
What a great question. I appreciate you asking about connectivity, and I'm easy to find on LinkedIn, for example. You can also email me for now at todd@stratoscg.com, or reach out to David and we can schedule a phone call together for more. Always interested in growing the network, always interested in listening to everyone's data points and then reading back and finding out if I'm properly informed of what they're going on. So I'm a naturally curious person and happy to help anyone that would like to transition from crisis mode to sustainable success mode.
And I understand you're going to be giving a on-stage talk in the near future in Switzerland. So is there any message you'd like for some people to come to listen to you there, or do you want to keep it invitation only?
I wouldn't be a father of three if I didn't say speaking in Switzerland under the Swiss flag is a huge plus. I think we can all agree on the plus side of that. As far as content, the international air of mystery is between you and me. As the organizer of said conference, David, what would you expect the audience to get out of a presentation from me on stage?
Without giving too much away, I think that it's definitely going to be operational focused from experience that you've had, like experiential knowledge transfer. That's number one. Two, it's going to be from the finance side of things because you've lived through it. Like I said, your history of going through the ups and downs in the aviation industry as a whole. You can speak about that from your own lived experiences and how you've been able to not only plan for those, but how you've actually got over those and been able to produce yields, how you've been able to grow businesses beyond that. So it's not just like an exercise. And so there's also things that are coming into the future. So how can people prepare? Let's say somebody's there that's been done it, they've got the mug, they've got the t-shirt, they know all about it already. But what's the next stages? And I feel as if your network and the way you approach a problem is quite specific enough that people would like to listen to that, and you come across in an eloquently spoken manner that's easy to understand, even for a neophyte that can say, okay, I get this, I want to be part of this, can you tell me more? At least from my side of the event hosting thing, I think that's what the guests can basically appreciate from you being there. And I think they'll have a lot of fun, a lot of knowledge transfer, and hopefully people will be able to talk openly and it'll be a mutual cooperation between both sides. That's my point.
Terrific. I will take that as a challenge and challenge accepted.
Excellent. So thank you very much for listening to this podcast, and we'll look forward to you on our next episode when we're going to be speaking to another person that's been in the industry for more than a couple of decades and what the experiences they've been able to bring to the aviation business and also for finance. So catch you later, everybody, and thank you very much for listening. Bye from me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and everybody tune in to the follow-on episodes. Can't miss it.